Well, we'll start with the usual prayer for teacher and student. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily disagree with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. On many occasions I have spoken about revaluation, and I've used that word. And so tonight I'm going to explore what we mean by that. And the topic is revaluation, the key to realization. So whenever we have a topic, we have to explore the terms that we're using. And if we are revaluing or reevaluating something, the first thing we have to do is find out how we currently value things or evaluate things. Evaluate, even the word suggests that there is a value in all the things around us, what we can generally call our environment. But the environment is quite complex. What is the environment? Well, we're not normally aware that the body itself is an environment, and yet it is. We are probably more aware that thoughts are an environment. That is a kind of mental field in which many things operate, thoughts and feelings. And so we have a body that is subject to vagaries of health, ups and downs. And we have something called a mind that happens to be a jumping mind. And what's the meaning of it all? And so in all of this, in this field of experience, there's one common factor to all of us. And that is that we don't always experience joy and happiness. We don't always experience peace, and we're always looking for these things. Now, in these Vedanta talks, these are oft-repeated concepts. But I would ask you to consider them not just as concepts, but to consider them as your personal experience. And in your personal experience, you can easily identify many, many factors where there's instability in your life. And we can also identify how delicate the human being is, how potentially vulnerable the human being is. One moment healthy, next moment ill. One moment breathing well, next moment we have a cough or a cold. One moment we are striding along with full health. Next minute, we stumble and fall and have an accident. And then, of course, there's that environment around us containing people who are close to us. And this, again, we can be concerned. So there are many, many things which upset the calmness of what we might call a mind. An intangible thing, but we all know what it is. We all experience all kinds of inner adventures and ups and downs, and it doesn't end there from waking to sleeping, because all of this mental activity continues. We continue thinking, we continue solving problems in dreams, we continue experiencing many different types of forms in a way which seems to us a little jumbled. But there are moments where everything is calm, and all the ancient philosophers, the Upanishads, registered this state of consciousness where we inquire, who am I, what is consciousness, and so on. All of this has to be explored, not just in one state, but at least in 3 states. And this is much before things like anesthetics that produce a deep kind of sleep experience, in part of which we get impressions and then that drifts off into sleep. General anesthetic does it. And obviously there's a correlation between all of that experience and the neurological system that we call the brain, a highly developed network of electrical impulses that are all the time like lightning strikes, all the time flashing. We can see it, we can measure it. We can measure brain waves when things are active, some of them registering involuntary movements, and some of them registering voluntary movements, conscious decisions or reactions. So when we talk about the environment, we're talking about a whole range of experiences. And we can collectively call this our world, and then ask how will we value it. Obviously, we value it very highly. If we did not value it highly, then we wouldn't operate in it or wish to operate in it. We would simply resign and say, let's withdraw, no point in life. But there's obviously a point or a purpose. Now, we have to bring in not just ourselves, we have to bring in the whole law of walking, working, life, some of it wriggling, some of it static, called plants and so on. This whole range is within our environment. And remarkably, some of it is as if a brain was operating. What do I mean by that? Well, I can explain by way of a question. Is a brain, in the human sense, or the sense of, let's say, mammals, is a brain necessary for planning, deciding, thinking, evaluating? Now, we might actually be tempted to say, no, it's not necessary. On what basis? You see, there's something called slimy mold. You'll know it's something like yeast. You put a certain environment, it won't be long before some mold develops. Let's say on jam. On jam, you leave it open and leave it there for months, and all of a sudden, it's generating some kind of life. And slimy mold is an interesting phenomenon because it sends out tentacles searching for food. Now, it has no nervous system or brain that we know of. It is not exactly one kind of life or the other, difficult to classify. And yet it has a vital role in cleaning up the environment. And when you see how it operates as a single cell and how it decides, as it were, to combine with other cells and make a unit, something like what we call a slug. A slug is a series of cells who have decided, for convenience, to collect together for a common purpose. And this unit and many others will pursue food, and in experiments, a kind of labyrinth is set up in a laboratory, a very complex labyrinth. And in the center of it is put slimy mold. And at two corners, let's say at the bottom of the labyrinth, is some kind of food. And then the whole thing is monitored. How does the slimy mold reach out to get its food? It sends out its avenues in different pathways at the labyrinth. And when it comes to a dead end, it stops and goes back and rubs out the pathway and the evidence of the pathway, leaves a slime there, so nothing can go back into it. It's a clue. We've tried that, we don't go back there. So it looks for another avenue and eventually finds the most efficient route to the food source. Without a brain, it's doing it. Now, this is great evidence, I would say, for something that is intelligent, that acts as a driving force behind what we commonly call life. Something that drives you from within and pulls you from outside. And you can be a biologist and study this and continuously open your mouth in gaping wonder at this wonderful, wonderful scene going on. And not only that, but the efficiency in planning and deciding, we'll use these terms, a route that is the quickest, most efficient, is now being used by town planners in Japan and other countries. Imitating with models, okay, what is the quickest route? What did the slimy mold teach us? What did it find? On a model that is a replica of the town or a new housing area, and see what is the quickest route for, let's say, industrial supply or commercial supply, and we will make our roads according to that. And they have even put these small organisms into microchips so that enhances the efficiency of the direction of the function of the microcell, the microchip. So many people studying what we might call nature have found one thing. Nature teaches us things. Not only that, but approximately, let's say 40, 50%, maybe as high as 60% of all medicinal drugs come from fungi that operate in a very similar way. Somehow, almost by magic, these life forms appear. And we'd be hard pressed to find out where they come from. And we know that these fungi have made an alliance, as it were, with the algae in the early days, let's say 1 billion years ago on the Earth. And from there developed plants and trees and ferns and you and me, ultimately, groups of cells like this. And when we say you and me, we're talking about physical you and me. But that brings us to another point. So our environment is like this and full of events of wonder, but often we miss it because we require on scientific investigation and discoveries to create new avenues of wonder for us that collectively we call our environment. And this is one way of valuing it, by looking at this with wonder, but coming to a conclusion. Behind it must be a driving force, something that is moving it forward purposefully, creating a kind of teleology, not blind, not purposeless, but very clever. And we know from physiology nowadays that in stochasm, so in other words, in random changes within a cell, the mutations that occur are remedied not by one functional aspect within the cell, but many. So that there's a plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, so that nothing much gets through. In other words, there's a whole network of intelligent operations going on in the nucleus of a cell. And we have and outside the cell also. And we are really nonplussed if we take simply this is a mistake or take it for granted or dismiss it. There's a highly complex drama of life going on before our very eyes. And what that means is that we have every opportunity when we see what we dismiss as life to look behind it and see Are we evaluating it correctly? And if we are not, or if we are, what impact does that have for us in dealing with problems, physical, emotional, mental, domestic, etc., in the environment? And it seems to me that we all come across problems. So that when a doubt comes, do we have a way of dealing with it? Well, we can take some examples from those people who are natural problem solvers in the realm of arts and science. And in each case, it took a shift of attitude, which stopped evaluating things in one way and looked at things from a different point of view. And we all have the capacity to do that. We all have a whole stockroom, whole resource of possibilities. Some time ago, people asked me about our own society. Would there be a dictum that I would recommend using that would show our vision? And I said, yes. Infinite possibilities. We are dedicated to exploration of infinite possibilities. Within you are infinite possibilities. But our evaluation tells us maybe not. It emphasizes so-called limitations, and as long as we do that, we'll be limited. But when we look at the examples that I've just given, just the slimy mold, which is there, that progressively and persistently finds ways out of a problem, instinctively does it. Now, we could also instinctively do it, but there's a methodology. What's that methodology? When a doubt comes, we don't answer the questioner about the doubt. Somehow we wait patiently, and what we do is we use the experience that we have, the stock of information that we have, maybe derived from scripture, maybe derived from an inspiring talk. A talk is only worthwhile if it leaves shining eyes. If after this talk you all feel different and my enthusiasm spreads onto you, and if you don't fall asleep, that's a liability, of course, then there's something wonderful that happened. Swami Vivekananda said, that if we are not generous enough, I'm paraphrasing, he puts it in this terms, he who lives for others lives. The rest is more dead than alive. If we have the possibility of exploring infinite possibilities in ourselves and others, leaving an impact behind us, a trail behind us, that leaves a smile on our face, that makes the shining eyes. And tears are also part of the shining eye phenomena. So that you can transform somebody who is suffering from doubt or fear or some difficulty in life and present some new way of thinking, something which is uplifting, and leave them in a more elevated state. Now, this is a kind of tapasya, and according to the Bhagavad Gita, this kind of tapasya is called this tapasya of speech, where your speech becomes blessing, beneficial to all. It becomes a kind of blessing speech. It doesn't buy into criticism. It doesn't buy into negativity. It doesn't buy into the news. It creates its own news, which highlights all the glory of what we see in our environment. And so if you listen to the news, how did you evaluate your environment? You could evaluate your environment as a creaky, dysfunctional world with many, many difficulties and problems. Because that's what's emphasized in the media. But you could just as equally emphasize simple events of glory. Instead of saying, what a pity, our mantra could be, what a glory, what a glory. We could transform the whole world by giving good news. When we tune into news, we should add what kind of news? Bad news. You can say BBC bad news, not BBC news. Well, there's always good news, but we miss it if we evaluate the world in a particular way. There's always a plus in our subconscious reserve. In the subconscious area, we can produce a number of ideas. But what is this subconscious mind that we have? We have a stock there of memories, accumulated information and knowledge from books and teachers and discussions. And that's we can bring out, plus a very important component, our own original thinking. If it wasn't for original thinking, we'd have no creativity and no discoveries of our own. Think from an independent point of view, shift your attention, and find a novel, creative solution to every problem, so that what is this human person? It becomes a divine equipped machine, as it were, or a divinely equipped instrument for solving problems creatively and having fun doing it. So we can call up from the subconscious mind. Don't make it idle, always thinking about it, mulling over it, being inventive. Because we can call up from the subconscious mind all the hidden wealth of a personal property to be solved only within that area. But if we view it like that, we've missed the creative component of it. What is that creative component? There's an area where problems get solved when we are patient and stay. And this is called cosmic mind. So cosmic mind, it can be made to come according to the necessity, stand at the right time, at the right place, so that we make the personality a kind of sensitive instrument where, when the challenge comes from outside, the reaction will be from the subconscious mind that we call in scripture Hiranyagarbha. In the Mahanarayana Upanishad, this wonderful series of passages dedicated to this Hiranyagarbha, this golden womb of everything, equating it to the Lord of all beings, what is called Prajapati. And so, for example, the resplendent Prajapati was born at the beginning of creation from the supreme potent with the power of Maya. And what is Maya? All this environment that we see and evaluate is really made from name and form, Namarupa. Let me explain. This is essentially a summary of what we call Maya. Rupa is a form, and we have to have a form. You see, some people say, well, you've never seen a unicorn. Well, this is true, but you have seen a horse, and you do know what a horn looks like, and you cannot think or imagine of anything that you have not experienced. So the combination of these things make it, this is called form. And yet, you see, you've seen these objects, but when you imagine them, this is called nama, the subtle portion. So that you can close your eyes at any moment in time and daydream and recall all the things that you're not physically seeing, and yet there's a mental picture in all of them. We use this in meditation. In meditation, we create an imaginary scene using the full force of our representative imagination. And there we construct a beautiful picture, a beautiful something that is highly representative of a perfect ideal of a divine. And there we apply some feeling to it, some appreciation, some love, some understanding, until it reveals itself. We can say in a coaxing way, come on, open up, please, open up, please. When we do it intensively, it's called yearning. And yearning for freedom or yearning for God, according to whether you're a devotee or whether you are somebody dedicated more to philosophical exploration, whatever it is, then this yearning must be there. One motive is I yearn for freedom, but the other motivation is I yearn for a sight of my beloved, a union with my beloved, a mystic union. In both cases, the same thing. A yearning is necessary. And so this Maya has these two kind of aspects to it, name and form. And in turn, for there to be a form, there must be space. Every object is contained and defined in space. But then you see the space of the mind gives us the nama portion. This is called, of course, Maha, great space, Mahakasha. And then we have Chidakasha, and then this Chidakasha, the more subtle space. So where we find pure consciousness itself. So having been born, he, that is, this Prajapati, became the one sustainer and nourisher of all beings. The same Paramatman here is designated as Hiranyagarbha, supports the earth as well as heaven. And then, naturally, knowing this, the prayer comes, may we worship that shining one with offerings, who is of the nature of bliss, or whose characteristics, nature, cannot be questioned, interrogated, who became the sovereign ruler of all beings and existing on the earth, who controls as the indwelling spirit all the bipeds, the quadrupeds, and all the other creatures evident on this earth. Not just you and me, but even the slimy mold. Giver of the self and all selves, in reality, being himself, who is the bestower of strength. But do we evaluate this normally in this way? This is an example of a revaluation. Don't think, therefore, that you have your own mind. So the first rule in this whole thing will be that rule number one, you have no mind of your own. Don't think that you have your own mind. What we call your mind is just simply a small projection, as it were. A small projection into of the tremendously universal, infinite cosmic mind, projected into a local area. And when we assume there's a boundary, our infinite possibilities are gone. But when we shift and say it is all cosmic mind, then standing there at the right time, at the right place, we make the personality, as I say, a kind of sensitive instrument. And when the challenge comes from the outside, then the reaction will be from the subconscious mind, that is Hiranyagarbha mind. And then we get the running inspiration necessary. Take us and see where it fits, is your question. There's no problem then when you do that. The solution is made. And so in this way, you'll be a running inspiration, and a spiritual discipline, whether done alone or in the company of others, by study, let's say, discussion, pilgrimage, or by facing actual troubles, we can say, send me on an errand which is troublesome, and we won't complain. We can stand there, we can call up the inside values to suit the problem, to simply stand there. And if God knows you are ready, that you are waiting to get the inspiration, then instead of running away from the problem or cursing yourself or fighting it, that is the normal reaction in our normal evaluation, or crashing through it. If you watch, then something else will come from within. An original idea, put it in there. It matches very well. If so, all are benefited. It has a wide range of reaching consequence. But we must be imagining that this given human personality is a divinely constructed equipment for facing so-called problems fearlessly. What are you? I am a problem solver. I'm constructed in such a way that my personality is there for facing so-called problems, because there's always a matching solution provided by the infinite cosmic mind. So don't ask for the key. It'll come out and fit, and it'll come out and fit that in. It's useful. Your whole life will be hour by hour problems of various types, no doubt, faced like a sports person who has got inner equipment. It comes in, and God comes in as an outside problem, and stands there, multiplied by time, and we call it a chronic problem. But it won't go until you take the relevant key, and then there's no problem. You navigate it very well. Then outsiders may say this person has got some kind of miracle or some kind of special ability, some kind of CDs or something like that. They don't realize that such a person renounced. What does renunciation mean? Now we have a number of terms for detachment. So revaluation is one way of saying discrimination. Discriminating is shifting our point of view and saying, this is not my mind, it's a cosmic mind. And I put a kind of local limitation around it. As soon as I remove that, become patient and open up the area to the cosmic mind, I can no longer say I have my mind. We have to make that reevaluation. That's the first reevaluation that we have to make. So we see we are cosmic beings. And put poetically, that means we are angels from heaven, sent here, supplied with an earthly car to move about with earthly problems and to solve. Well, if that's the case, we can be a blessing kind of person. Why don't we bless all the people in our environment? Are you not born? No, the machine is born. I'm not born. The machine is born. So this thing which we call a body, well, you're not born, you're unborn. The problems are born, the equipment is recharged every time. And the recipe always comes from within. It's already there in cosmic mind. That's called Hiranyagarbha. And that's the cosmic mind in Vedantic literature. It's described as this. So when the right key comes, there's no problem. Things have changed. So this Hiranyagarbha, this cosmic mind, beautifully described as Hiranyagarbha, which means the golden womb or the golden seed from which everything comes. It contains within itself two essential elements. What you speak internally, called nama, and what you intend internally, unspoken and still unspoken, but presented. The vibrations, what I always call these vibrations, you're familiar now, tanmatras, are required. These are rudimentary principles of creation. They do the work. They are the angels that make the crooked places straight before you. I put an intention in, I sustain it with the full capacity of visualization and enthusiasm and faith. And then what we call divine grace, Gautam Matras, all the angels, they then suitably sort it out and vibrate according to this cosmic mind. They cannot help it. They come from the cosmic mind. They are rays, as it were, from the cosmic mind. So God's grace in tremors, whose crests are taken alone, isolated as a series of corpuscles or wave crests which form the outside world, is what we are seeing. And if you intend it, you can say, well, Lord, let us play a game. We can make you as a problem, myself as a challenged person. You give me the key, and it will slowly adjust itself. Now you see, this is why any student coming to a teacher, we see it in the Upanishads, asking, please remove my doubts. What is the teacher's response? Stay here, my child. We find it in Chandogya Upanishad. Stay here, my child. Don't go anywhere. I won't answer your problem immediately, but I have cows that you need to attend to. Keep you busy. And so as the person reflects, cogitates, in moments where no particular activity is occurring, let us say, doing the ablutions in the morning, brushing the teeth, something like that, shuffling around suitable ideas, something comes, some kind of inspiration comes. And we have to have the art of waiting nicely and seeing what comes from the infinite cosmic mind into our area. And then we say, it struck me. We have that phrase. Now, as you know, I'm a great fan of the great revolutionary composer Beethoven. So I imagine a person now who is suffering physically, frustrated because of a loss of hearing, even though his whole profession is music, rejected by those people who are supposed to support him. Nobody understands him properly. He is in a position, nobody to support him. He's not in any kind of normal sort of supporting relationship. And in amidst this mental torture, physical suffering, he comes to a point of near suicide, and then he writes a letter, a kind of testimony, explaining why he has come to the brink of desperation. He's gone on a kind of downward spiral. But what has he done? He resisted it, climbed out upward in the glory of nature, and waited for this tuning in from the cosmic mind, and from it, the most glorious, outstanding, revolutionary, transforming music that is still alive and vibrant and existing today, and inspires millions of people with familiar tunes. Where does it come from? And so we can only answer, cosmic mind. That's all. What we call God. So we can play this game. So that's the first rule. Revalue the mind. The next thing we should do is revalue the body. And so, of course, the passage that is often quoted by me, the Katha Upanishad there, Param Ekadasha Dwaram Ajasya Vakra Chetasaha Anushtaya Na Sochati Vimuktasya Vimukshate Itad Vaitat. There is, where? Here, an 11-gated city. Bhagavad Gita tells us 9. This is repetition for all of you. But it's a way of revaluing the body. I've already said, not my mind, God's mind. Now I have to say, not my body, God's body. So this revaluation is a kind of discernment about the whole of life, and particularly starting with me as an individual. And then, having revalued everything, does it make a difference? Yes, radically so. It puts me in a controlling position, but it also puts me in a revealing condition. It leads me to an area where, having made a discernment, which I can call revaluation, we now come to, at the other end, a realization. And what's in between? Having revalued everything, then I can no longer own these things. When I shift my position and say, not my body, but God's temple, or this belonging to one that is unborn, whose consciousness is unflickering, is an 11-gated city. Having made that shift, I'm no longer attached to it. This is called detachment or renunciation, but it's a mental one. It's not that I go off to a monastery away from all my so-called difficulties, because that's a downward spiral. We're looking for an upward spiral. A downward spiral can start off with doubt, fear, despondency, despair, and then into the dark depths of depression. Well, come out of it. How? By revaluing things and then seeing, what a glory. It's not all downward. It's actually all upward. The whole of the trend of nature is upward, not downward. There are no downsides in nature. It's all lifting up, lifting up, lifting up. It's all pushing from within. It's like the slimy mold exploring new areas with its tentacles and persisting until the problem is solved. Namely, I found the food. Driven by food, no doubt. But it's not food. It's driven by a desire to exist and perpetuate existence. Why? Because we have a purpose. There's a teleology about it. There's a direction. It's very clear. You can make the counter argument if you like. It's all haphazard. It's all guesswork. It's all chaos. There's a blind watchmaker. This is the famous Richard Dawkins expression, a blind watchmaker. More than that, it's a dead watchmaker. In fact, it's not a watchmaker at all. You see, it's a bit like saying, there's a beautiful garden, but we suspect it just rearranged itself by itself because there's no gardener. Of course there's a gardener. There's beauty which is there and sustained. Something is behind it. What is that something? It's neither name nor is it form. It is substance. It is this unborn one whose consciousness is unflickering. We get our problems by reducing them, of course, to figures of speech. So this one figure of speech will be, there's an 11-gated city behaving in all ways like a city. And then we can use other figures of speech to illustrate the point. And so, for example, when we use a figure of speech, the figure of speech becomes something like an assertive affirmation. And by assertive affirmation, we are stirring up the cosmic mind and delivering in a creative way our future destiny. If we do it in a positive way for all beings, for ourselves and others, then this really will be a fully liberated person who's not only discovered the inner nature of his own being, her own being, but discovered it everywhere. Having opened the eyes from a realization, they will see this presence everywhere, in every corner, in every avenue. Can't avoid it. Then having seen it, what will you do? With a changed and transformed attitude, you'll be actively involved in the development of the world, in the upliftment of the world. You'll be a transmitter of shining eyes. You'll be transmitting all the qualities that you have cultivated of love and truth and beauty and goodness and harmony. You'll be a living, vibrating light that will shine for everyone to see and bathe in that light. And we know it because we have come across such beings. When we say that there are refugees today everywhere, well, the devotee always looks for refuge. They'll look for refuge at the feet of the Lord, is the poetic expression. But the difference is the refugee is desperate, full of doubt and fear, full of uncertainty and insecurity, full of mental shakiness. But the refuge that the devotee takes has none of these characteristics. It's full of being loved. It's full of faith. It's absolute trust. It's holding the Lord's hand like a child holds the mother's hand. And Jesus puts it, and I've quoted you often in a funny way, with a kind of sense of humor, says, what father, when asked by a child, please give me bread, will give a stone instead? No, we'll give the bread. So that one that is within us, urdhvam pranam unyatya apanam pratyag ashyati, leads the out-breath upward, casts inwards the in-breath. This small, small entity, as it were, of the size of a thumb, this dwarf, who's seated in the middle, and all the divine deities, all the forces of nature adore that one. What a beautiful, beautiful picture. A picture suitable for meditation. And when that embodied self dwells within the body, slips off and is released from the body, what is there that remains? That one never came, never went. And truly, the repetition of the etadvaitat is there, that this truly is that. And so these are from the scriptural text that explains in summary. In order to squeeze the orange of life. I'm referring, of course, to a dialogue that was there. The great atheist Ingersoll had a discussion with Swami Vivekananda. You religious, spiritual people and all that, you don't know how to enjoy life. We know how to do it because it's all we have. And so what happens when the body falls? Well, it falls. It's buried in the ground and it rots. Nothing more. So for the meantime, we should enjoy life. He didn't say that, but that was the inference. And Vivekananda says, on the contrary, we know how to squeeze the juice of life, the orange of life. We know how to extract it fully and fully enjoy it. It's fully enjoyable. Why? Because we have shifted an attitude where there's no fear, no doubt, there's all trust, all faith, and understanding that every so-called challenge that comes up is God in disguise, and every solution that comes is coming from the cosmic mind. And it's not coming from us, it's coming from an infinite storehouse of experience that is broader than our so-called individual mind. We have access to it. But it requires patience. It requires recognition that shuffling ideas around, waiting for the exact moment, this inspiration will come from the cosmic mind, which is creative and original and inspiring, being shared with others, has the effect of elevating people's spirit and creating the phenomenon of shining eyes. So this is the key, true key to realization. It starts with what we call revaluation. It goes on then to renunciation, mental renunciation, and it then goes on to realization. But revaluation is the key. Use it well. So thanks. And I said I'd make this conversational. because people have remarked, historically every Tuesday we used to assemble, and now nobody assembles, or very few people assemble. Not nobody assembles, very few people assemble. But in any event, we'll do the best we can. So I suppose, although we have dedicated sessions to question answers, we can open the floor, if you will, for any comments or questions additional to this. And if you're all stunned into silence, my only wish is that you go away with shining eyes.
There is that. So in computer science, one of the things we do is to design algorithms. Algorithms are a way of giving step-by-step recipe for doing something. And particularly for optimization problems, we design a lot of different type of algorithms, and some of them, for example, are inspired by natural things. So one of them would be the slimy mold. So we look at how it optimizes the route to a certain place, and then based on that, we design that kind of algorithm. Then we have something based on the way the bees work, and something based on the way the ants work to forage their food, and so on. So there is a lot to be learned from these simple creatures in terms of how they optimize their paths.
Yes, I hope you all heard that. So in computer science, there's a lot that is being learned from nature, duplicating the learned efficiency that has been there from experimentation, trial and error, learning. All behavior is learned behavior, is the theory. And so what we call instinct is really just learned behavior that is now entrenched in us and established. You see, if you know something, you don't have to repeat it. Knowledge means the cessation of the necessity to repeat something. You don't have to constantly wake up in the morning and remind yourself of your name. Write it 1,000 times. In the old days when you wrote checks, oops, I have to repeat now my name another 1,000 times. I wrote 1,000 checks today. So the name is being depleted. It's not like that at all.
So the slimy mold is very interesting because it doesn't have a central, one central CPU, but there are a lot of different processing units that can work in parallel.
Yes, yeah. So Deepak here is mentioning the slimy mold and being used, and other things being are working in parallel with that. Yes, and other advantages are there and effects are there as a result of.
Yeah, because it doesn't have a central nervous system, so there's no central processing unit.
Yeah, yeah. But yet the issue still remains: how does it know? How does it know how to behave? So it must have memory in it without a central nervous system. It must have recall. It must have an element of knowledge about how to do things, how not to do things, and what is the most efficient way of doing it without a brain or central nervous system. It's quite remarkable. And remains a mystery in biology, but not in the Vedanta philosophy. Because how could it be otherwise? God dressed up in this way, see? And within that, the law of causation occurring for us. So, what is spiritual practice in this case, you see, is based on yam niyam of the yogis. So, revaluation of what is really God's glory on earth is previously supposed to be human cage with limitations, born from parents, and which is likely to die and end in a funeral place or cremation. So what a pity, where shall I go, is the normal mantra. That what a pity should be revalued and replaced with an assertion, what a glory, what a glory. That's what we should be doing. So I can say for 4 seconds, what a pity, but I acknowledge that. But what a pity, this friend can come, as I always say, come in the morning, have a cup of tea, come if you want, stay if you must, or stay if you can, go if you must. But replace it with something better. What a glory, what a glory. 16 seconds, 4 seconds minus 16 seconds plus. So you can say mentally, Lord, you produce your temple on earth. I called it my body. And what a funny thing I did. See the funny way in which you are previously valued. You've previously valued God's property as yours, taking ownership. God's glory as your cage. Well, get accustomed to it. So I'm only a spectator of God creating a body with earthly materials. That's all. He's the Lord of the earth. At his beck and call, things form. His creative power is here on the earth and in the slimy mold and all the other things. His digestive power is here always. And his creative office is also here, gold mind. So that being recognized, a small section is given to the previously human-based idea of birth and death and fear. That whole idea gets knocked out by this revaluation. It's kept there, it's a foil. And on the top of that, you can get this dominating principle of truth by studying it carefully, consciously touching the parts of the body as an exercise and saying, God's temple eyes, ears, not mine but thine. Like this, like this, like this, every avenue, every gate in the body, every one of the 11 gated city, you can do it. And when the oven fire ceremony takes place, for example, then because it's said, when you put the offering in, namama, it says, namama, namama, not for me, not for me. It's not for me, it's for the good of everyone. So even rituals have got it, this idea of detachment. Not for me, not for me. It's not mine. You take it off. Revaluation. That's the key discipline. And if you don't do that and you have a particular view, you see how many difficulties I've gone through this particular adventure called life. And many people have done many things and created many different narratives and stories and deformations and all kinds of things. But in the game of life, they may well be reborn as crocodiles. You don't think that God will say, oh, come on, you used to bite people's legs and pull people's legs. Next time, your temple won't be a human one. We put you in the correct context. You can do it all you like. You can do it as a crocodile. We have to have a sense of humor. So, about these things. All right, good. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you,
Swami.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you.